we have a pretty typical Subaru engine, 1998 Subaru Legacy. I'm going to do the valve cover gaskets, or cam cover gaskets, whatever you want to call them, front crank seal, and oil pan gasket. I'll get the show on the road. Taking these covers off here. Get your 12mm sockets ready. Take the coolant jug out. And we'll loosen up the belts. 12mm and 10mm usually, maybe a 14mm here and there. We'll get those off. Take both fans out too. Again, just 10mm bolts holding them in. Disconnect the fan connectors and get the fans out. Give them some space to get that tensioner bracket out. Valve cover gasket on this 98 Subaru Legacy, pretty easy. Here we got this here, one bolt here, bolt here, bolt here, 10mm bolts. Pull those out. There's a hose you have to take off above. The other side's pretty much the same way. We're going to get under the timing cover, so we're taking the 10mm bolts out along here of the timing cover. Plug in over here, plug in over here, 10mm bolts for the fans. We'll get the fans out of here, and we'll lower the car again, and we'll keep going with the belts. So you can really just loosen up these two bolts here, so I can just slide out like that. And then the connector here, a little tab here, you just pull up on the tab and pull that out. So we're ready to go. Now we got the radiators out. Now we have our cooling fans out. We have plenty of room to get this other belt off. And you get the idea. We'll take that belt off and we'll keep going and work on the crankshaft pulley. Now for the crankshaft pulley, we have a 22mm socket on there. We'll put a wrench on there. Now we have this pretty cool tool called the round wrench, RWHS824. We're going to strap that on over the crankshaft pulley, and so we can hold it in place when we break it loose. Otherwise, we're going to take the radiator out and maybe the AC out and get an impact gun in there. Or if you're really strong and want to try and hold that with big, large channel locks. Otherwise, I'm not going to get to it right now, but back here, is the timing marks back here. And you can move this hose, this big bunch of wires, and underneath there, just trust me, down there is a little plug you can take out, and you can get to the flywheel and torque converter. And you should be able to get a screwdriver or pry bar down there and wedge it in there somewhere, wedge it on the teeth to hold the engine in place while you break it loose. So that's probably what you need to do to break loose the crankshaft pulley bolt. It's pretty tight. So we get it on there, and we get it broken loose. Pretty nice. Put the crankshaft pulley off. Now we're just going along the top and taking off the screws, bolts. There's one underneath the AC, one or two underneath the power steering you want to make sure you get to. Otherwise, again, they're all 10mm bolts. Just get in there and get them off, and then we'll pull the covers off. So here's a timing belt here, and we've lined up the timing marks and got some white out. Pretty popular to use some white out and make your marks stand out. You can see that as well, but there's a notch on the crankshaft. There's a notch and then a little dimple there. We've marked the dimple, and of course over here too. We've marked the stuff over here as well. So you line up your marks, and you should be able to take it apart. So your marks are lined up, and then we'll take this bottom flat pulley out, probably a 14mm bolt. Take that out, and then you should be able to get the and the tensioner too. Take that out. It's hydraulic. You'll need to collapse that in a vise or somehow. Slowly, take your time with it, and then put a pin in to hold it in place. And we'll take the belt off. Here's the tensioner pulled out of the Subaru. I do want you to notice that there is a washer on the back side, so pay attention to that. When you take the tensioner out, make sure you find it and get a hold of it. And we'll put this in a vise, collapse that down, and put a pin in it. Maybe a drill bit, something like that will fit usually, small. Okay, because we're doing the front crank seal, got the front gear off there, and did have some cardboard here to protect that. We used 2 pry bars, and we ended up using a pry bar to get that off. You may not have to, but we did, and we didn't want it to fly into the radiator. So we got it off, and we're gonna get a screwdriver or a special tool to pull that seal out and get the new one installed. I just removed the 2 10mm bolts for the washer fluid jug here, moved it out of the way. This fits in a little slot. Over here you pull it out and you should have enough room. We got it loosened up. May or may not take the oil filler neck off there as well to get this out. But it's just a couple 10mm bolts if we need to. So here we have the oil pan coming down on the Subaru. They say they don't use a gasket, they use silicone, but I do believe there's a gasket back here, an O-ring apparently of some kind, and of course got the sucker tube here for the oil. And I guess if you don't need to do any gasket, you could just clean this up real well and slather some more RTV on it and bolt it right back up. Otherwise you can take the 3 10mm bolts out of there, and then you can drop the whole oil pan, clean it up, get it all nice and clean, and then put it back together the right way. I did loosen up the dipstick tube above 10mm bolt, loosen that up. That's what I did, and here we are. Got the crankshaft cover kit, and actually I got more than just the crankshaft seal. I got this and the gasket and the O-ring. So just went ahead and took that off the front there, right there. Show you right here. Took a little hammer and tapped gently on the back side and loosened it up a little bit. Let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just 7 bolts. Hold it on, 10mm bolts. Disconnect the sensor connector. It does have 2 dowel pins, one here and then one up top, so you want to pull it off as straight as possible. Just makes it easier. and we'll clean this all up and we'll get the new parts on there and bolt it back in. So we have the oil pan here, we're just cleaning up, and it does look like there's some kind of rubber seal right there, and also on the oil pickup it looks like there's an O-ring, and you could probably either just use some silicone on either one of those. I think we'll replace the O-ring on the oil pickup here, but don't overdo the sealant, don't overdo the RTV, but yeah, just go ahead and put some RTV on this and put it back together. So we've got this tensioner in a vise, and we've got it collapsed. Like I said, take your time with it. Got our tool. Done a few of them, so we have a special tool that will fit some of them. If you don't have the tool though, I've checked it out, and a 5/64 drill bit will fit in this car just fine. Right there, so you're going to put that in and release the vise so it locks it in place. And then once you put the time belt on and all your marks have lined up, then you pull that pin out at the end after you have all your lines marked up. And you might want to put some cardboard in front of the radiator, block it with some wood. I've heard about people pulling the pins out and jabbing it right into the radiator. So be careful when you pull the pin out if it fights you at all. So there we go. We'll put our pin in and we'll loosen up the vise a little bit, and we're good to go. Now the valve cover gaskets or cam cover gaskets, whatever you want to call them, have this shouldered bolt, so you just basically tighten them down until they get tight, because you'll definitely feel it hit the shoulder, and then just maybe just tweak it just a little bit more, maybe 10 or 20 degrees, just a little bit, to snug it up, and you're good to go. Here's the oil pan gasket, getting ready to put it back on. There's a new gasket here. It's all cleaned up. I do have 4 bolts for the back because they're pretty hard to get to. I used a 1/4 inch drive ratchet and a swivel and 10mm stubby socket. It'd be difficult to start them probably without being able to see the holes. So I got the bolts put in and got little O-rings on each one to hold them in place, and should be able to mount it up there hopefully, and then go from there. See how it goes. Okay, putting the Subaru timing belt back on. I started at the crankshaft, went over to the driver's side, whipped it around there, and then I actually went over here to the passenger side and got it around there because it's still a tight fit. And then this pulley's actually a little loose, so I can wrap it around here and tuck it underneath there. So that's loose, and I'll take my last flat pulley, I'll put it down where it belongs, right down here, and then I'll tighten up those 2 bolts, and then I'll pull the pin. Be careful not to poke the radiator.